A woman cries her heart out inside a temple, leading to more doing the same. Chinese people are running out of hope. They're resorting to kneeling in front of the god of justice himself, crying out of injustice caused by the government. Justice Bao, a legendary figure of anti-corruption and defender of commoners, it's just become a symbol of resistance in today's China. Well, at least they didn't do it in front of the statue of Mao Zedong, otherwise it would be pretty awkward if they have to remove it. Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang. After a failure to obtain justice from the Chinese government, Chinese people have resorted to their last hope, gods in heaven. But the statue of Justice Bao Zheng is one of the most ironic statues to kneel before to seek justice, in today's China at least. He was a historic figure who was known for anti-corruption, for justice, and for legality. Bao's temple statue was removed after many people started to kneel in front of it and bow their eyes out. Now, why is it ironic? Well, Xi Jinping, the current Chinese leader, has been saying all his political career that he's all about anti-corruption. Well, it just turns out that his version of anti-corruption isn't really about justice, but it's more of a power struggle. And because of that, in the process of obtaining more power, he's essentially destroyed the livelihood of all the Chinese people, and that's what's causing a lot of the misery we're seeing today. So because the very reason that people are kneeling in front of Justice Bao is caused by the other anti-corruption figure in Beijing, that whole situation makes it very, I would say, awkward. Which is why they've now removed the statue. But more on that in a little bit. Now, Chinese people today face a problem where they cannot seek justice within the government system or these so-called welfare systems that's been set up for the benefit of the people. In this miserable state, no government official would hear their calls or try to help them. And even if their appeals were heard, there's really no follow-ups and there's no mend to their struggle in life. And that's really where people lost hope. So videos started showing Chinese people visiting the temple of Bao Zheng, where the signs in front of the statue says, upright and just, crying on their knees. Now, this actually all started because a woman was seen bowing her eyes out, hoping that Justice Bao would possess some righteous man so that he could judge the wrongdoings of the Chinese government today. After that video went viral online, many more tourists started to come to this temple and doing the exact same thing, and they come in crowds much larger than the initial one. And it's even spread to other temples in other provinces, where basically it became a place of worship for misery and sort of this justice-seeking palace. And of course, the officials were quick to remove the statue this time. I think it only took them 2 days after the video went viral online, and they shut down the temple supposedly for temporary repairs. Internet users quickly summarized the situation as, remember, people in history, we had Lady Meng who cried so hard it toppled the Great Wall. And today we have a woman in red kneeling on the ground crying so hard it closed a temple. Now, of course, this all carries a satirical feeling in the sense that the CCP who always cries that they are for the people, right? But in reality, saying that they're upright and just is just that their definition of upright and just isn't really what we know as upright and just. It's actually the entirely opposite of reality. Now, people thought that the initial video of the woman crying was justified, given the fact that now we know some bit about the background as to what caused her to start crying. But more people were sympathizing with the feelings at the moment because you went through life and you suffered so much, and then at the right moment you were triggered by the words that were displayed there, justice and upright, and that really triggered her emotional breakdown because people really thought that this was going to be an isolated incident, just one particular person at the right moment just doing her thing, but it turned out to be a much bigger social reaction and a follow-up. So according to a post on Chinese social media, the woman in question was wrongfully treated in the aftermath of a court judgment in where the execution side of things, where basically the government side refused to follow up with the judgment of the court, and then that caused more problems for her due to financial and value assets disputes. And that's really what triggered her to kind of, after she was visiting her relatives, coming to this temple to basically break down in front of the god of justice himself. A version earlier alleged that the woman in question was wrongfully accused for crimes she did not commit, but it seems like the narrative has shifted because this person claimed that she was the woman in question. No matter which version is true, clearly she's miserable. It's raising awareness in a different way. Because if you think about it, when you see somebody holding a sign that says injustice or seeking justice for blah, 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 out on the streets, you don't really care that much, right? Because you don't have the time to find out why. But if this goes in the form of you kneeling down in front of the temple crying out loud, and then, that video goes online, that raises a lot of discussion points and awareness. Now, of course, it all ends with the symbol or the location. In this case, it's a temple becoming politically sensitive because the regime can't stand having this type of behavior happening, and so they closed it down. It became sort of a spiritual harbor for resentment and for social anger, as well as, of course, injustice in China. And everybody, that's the funny part, right, to Chinese people, which is that no matter what you do, in the end, you have to resort back to the deity of, in this case, the justice deity, to kind of vent out your anger and to try to get the problem solved. Even though China is a hyper-materialistic society, it seems people haven't forgotten the traditional route of paying respect to their ancestral spirits as well as these deities in hopes that something could happen or some events could turn around. At least they didn't do this at the temple of Mao Zedong. Otherwise, that statue would be at risk of being removed, and you don't want to paint Mao as the anti-revolutionary. So, like I said, it's an exposure in a different way, and it's just people in China resorting to different ways today to try to tell people what's going on, right? Whether that's internet censorship or police state control or just in general in the physical reality, there's a lot of restrictions, right? You're surveilled, blah, 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 all these things in China, but, they're finding creative ways to kind of tell the world what's really going on here. Now, according to the CCP, right, they have a very comprehensive relief system when it comes to dealing with people's trouble. I mean, they have people, the word people, in all of their judicial and social systems, right? People's Courts of China, People's Police, People's Liberation Army. All of these things allegedly come at the service of the people. But in reality, it is the most anti-people side of things there is in existence. So, now, let's just follow the technicality side of things, right? Like, if you actually had a problem in China, technically you could go to the People's Court, you could go to the Judicial, the Inspector Bureau, the police, to find resolutions for your problems. Except in every case, as we've seen with dissidents, anybody that's trying to seek justice, anything that has to do with state affairs, you're either blocked from visiting those particular people's bureaus or ministries, or you're arrested for disturbance. You're put up with charges like you're trying to subvert state power, or you're causing trouble, so on. And so it's the most far distant from reality there is when it comes to words like people or words like service. Think about it. The question is, why must you take it up with a artificial, in their eyes, being when you can get everything done by the all-powerful communist state? Well, in reality, you probably can't, and that's why they have to resort to this. Now, recently, someone actually tallied how many times that current leader Xi Jinping has pointed out the right direction for an industry or a particular sector in China, and the tally came out to be 244 times. So 244 different industries had their right directions of development pointed out by great glorious leader Xi Jinping, and guess what? All 244 of them, they're not doing so well right now. So it became a joke that every time Xi Jinping has pointed out the right direction for a particular industry or a particular government's head of state, for example, when he was criticizing Trudeau or he was speaking with some other leaders, it's like he's pointing out their direction for future advancement, and it just goes really wrong. And so under this context, if you think about it, 244 industries, how many people in China have been affected by these powerful pointing of directions to the point where they're suffering miserable lives now, or they're out of a job, or the general economy is just doing terribly? So the event at this temple has sparked a discussion online about whether Justice Bao would exist in China in its current state today. The answer is a definitive no. Now, during the Cultural Revolution, Bao and his entire lineage, they were actually condemned because they're a historical figure, and during the Cultural Revolution, everything was turned upside down. His family, their graves were actually dug up and displaced at one point, and they were hidden until their remains, of course, were hidden until after the end of the Cultural Revolution before they were put back into the earth. Now, Bao Zheng, or Bao Clear Sky, the title that was given to him later on in history, was referring to his fairness, his righteousness, his idea of being so just. It's like the clear sky, the cloudless sky, right? And so that's the idea. What he represents is just absolute justice. Now, in popular culture in China, in TV shows and dramas, he's often portrayed as this really dark-skinned guy with a crescent moon scar in the middle of his forehead. And the idea, he was always portrayed as this fierce and evil guy, but he's very fierce, but he's definitely not evil. He's known to defend the justice for commoners, like peasants in China back in the days. He's known for, impeaching court officials who are corrupt. So he's always involved in these really important state affairs and corruption cases. So he's like the complete opposite representation of the state of China today. Now, if you remember, there was an internet famous song called Qing Cheng Hanji. It was actually the original excerpt or the original sample of it comes from a Chinese opera, which actually refers to a particular case that Justice Bao Zheng was involved in. So here's why he can't exist in China today. His path to officialdom, his upbringing, as well as his later involvement in justice reforms for the common people, all of these things are not possible for officials in China today to take part of. And during his passage to the state exam at the age of 29, he did so with his own abilities fair and square, which is something that doesn't happen for these civil servants in China today. It's very hard to become one unless you can go through backdoor relationships with people already in the government to get you into the doorstep. And of course, he was also, the second reason is that he was involved in many impeachment trials for removing officials who are corrupt inside the Chinese court. And that's, again, something you can never find in today's China. All Chinese officials are corrupt in the CCP, and you're often swallowed by that corruption when you go inside the government. You cannot just remain clear and pure because it's such a big dive that once you fall into, you can never climb back out. And then third point is that he made a lot of reforms in which it favored the peasants and the commoners at the time. For example, he allowed the peasants to basically lodge complaints against officials and otherwise different ranks in society directly to his judgment court, and this allowed everybody to have an equal and fair opportunity in trial. And that was something that really changed the way justice and legal frameworks worked at the time in China. And so today, that's completely the opposite of what's taking place in China. You cannot get justice from the government side of things. So for somebody like him who remained above interpersonal affairs and corruption to be able to solve so many mystery cases and provide fair judgments for people, that's not something that's possible in today's China. So there was actually a famous story about him. He grew up really poor, so he was always, when he was studying for the exams, at one time, him and his friend, they met this merchant at the particular town. Now, this merchant was really, he admired their talents and their skills in education, that he invited them over to have a seat at their home. Now, when they arrived at the merchant's home, he informed them that he would like to invite them to lunch. And Bao, of course, declined at the time. And his friend was very confused. He asked him, he's simply a merchant. He's trying to give us lunch. We're poor, like we're studying. Why can't you take on this particular offer? And his answer was, it's very, very interesting. He says that, how can I remain unbiased if later on I am assigned to this particular place as an official involving a case with this particular merchant, if I had received a favor from him for this particular lunch? So the point of that story is that he was so about being unbiased when it comes to judgments that he would remain absolute of an authority. He could not do so if he had received a favor from this particular person. And so, of course, later on, he went on to become what people now refer to as the God of Justice, and that's one of the reasons why he could do so. So he would rather starve than to receive that lunch out of principle, right? Now think about the officials in China today. It's bribery, it's corruption, graft. So many people have overseas dealings and assets. That's never the case. Can you find true justice among those officials when you have problems to deal with in China? Of course not. And the issue today is that these qualities are promoted back in history, throughout all of China's history and its traditions, which is to be fair, to be virtuous. But today's society in China is hyper-materialistic. It's about deception, faking everything. It's about getting what you want the fastest and easiest way possible, even if it means you have to lie your way through. You have to fake everything and then just to get what you want, right? And so it's the complete reverse of what was being taught by the ancestral lessons. Corruption also applies to the judicial side of things. The judges, the lawyers, the inspector generals, all of them, they're subjected to this corruption. And those that do not fall for it, like the human rights lawyers who defend dissidents, religious minorities in China, they're harassed, they're jailed, and they're punished for defending the righteousness or the justice. Even the court system in China, the Supreme Court of China, is actually just a branch or an office under the judicial system, which is overseen by a committee and a committee party boss for the CCP. And we cannot expect any conventional methods anymore. Now, after the statue is removed, the next, who knows, there might be a god of fortune or a god of war or a god of wisdom that they will go to cry, to bow their eyes out. And this will continue. It's going to get more creative for people in China. All right, that's it today for the episode on the God of Justice in China, how it's becoming a symbol of resistance. If you enjoy the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel today. Until next time, bye-bye.